Day number 4 of making sourdough starter can be a joy or a despondency. Because this day you can be one of the lucky few who have their starter rises after the feeding on the third day. Or you can be those people that kind of discouraged because your starter is still not showing any kind of activity. It's either runny, smelly, no bubbles, and the like. If you experience a rare case where the starter doesn't rise since day 1, today you want to consider changing your flour, because it's most likely that the flour causes the inactivity. You can just get a new bag of flour or use different kind of flour such as whole wheat flour or rye flour. Since my starter rose after I fed it on the third day, on this fourth day I will do another feeding. I still apply 1 to 1 to 1 ratio this time by using 20-gram starter from day 3, and then I add 20 grams bread flour and 20 grams water. On this fourth day, my starter doesn't smell as bad as the previous day. I can start smell sweet scent of fermentation. So from now on, I will collect the sourdough discard. If you prefer though, you can still throw away the discard, especially if your starter doesn't rise after the feeding on the third day. The starter that doesn't rise tells you that the wild yeast and also lactobacilli have not grown yet. The starter is still in transition period. You can also speed up the process of making sourdough starter by using rye flour, because rye flour is really nutritious, and usually starter that is made with rye flour takes a short amount of time to be ready to be used. As a note, a starter with rye flour is more acidic than one with white wheat flour. So if you do not like acidic bread, then you can use the rye flour only to build the starter. Once the starter is active and ready to be used, you can maintain it or feed it with white wheat flour. The starter might be sluggish for 1 or 2 days because it's adjusting to the new food, but after that it will run just fine on it. Wheat flour, especially the white one, produces milder flavored starter, which translates into bread or sourdough breads with less tang. Here I'm done mixing the starter from day 3 with additional flour and water. Then I put this new starter on day 4 into a clean jar, and I will let it rest again at warm temperature between 28 to 30 degrees Celsius or 82 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. My starter went through the transition period really quickly, and it was able to rise after the feeding on the third day, which tells me that there are already wild yeast and lactobacilli in my starter. So the fermentation after this feeding on the fourth day will go a lot quicker. I can expect to see my starter already reaches its peak height or even collapses in the morning, because this is night when I do the feeding. Meanwhile, here I prepare a larger glass jar for the discard. And then I will put the discard in the refrigerator. The reason I use a glass jar is because while it is stored in the refrigerator, the sourdough discard will produce more acids. The longer it sits in the refrigerator, the more acidic the sourdough discard becomes. So I do not want the acids to react with whatever material in the container. So if it's possible, do not use plastic or any material that can react with the acids from the starter. To be honest, this sourdough discard can also be fed and it will be an active starter too. But if you only an occasional baker, you don't need much starter to keep. So this is a starter from day 3 that has been fed and becomes new starter on day 4. It is fermenting at room temperature and I will check on it about 12 hours after the feeding. If your starter doesn't rise after the feeding on the 3rd day, you still need to do the feeding today. Do it only once. Let it ferment as usual and see what happens the next day. This is my starter in the morning of the 5th day, about 12 hours after the feeding. And you can see that it looks like it rose and then collapsed. It even rose higher than the previous day. It was almost tripled in volume. It's a good sign for me because the starter will be ready in no time. The indication of the starter's readiness is the speed of fermentation. That is, how long it takes for the starter to reach its peak height after feeding at 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. Do not do flow test because it's highly inaccurate, and I'll talk about it more later on in the process. If your starter still doesn't rise, just let it be, let it ferment for another 12 hours.